Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coby's Brain, episode 28. We have a great show for you today. We got 17 reviews coming your way, so keep watching. We are going to get started with Coby's entertainment blog, Movies. We are starting with the 2021 film that came out pretty recently, No Time to Die, directed by Cary Joji Fukunaga. No Time to Die is the fifth and final James Bond film starring Daniel Craig. It's the final Daniel Craig James Bond film about Bond having to stop an evil villain with a powerful nanotech weapon. The movie has some supremely impressive action sequences, and also some pretty good humor. It has obviously amazing cinematography, great cast. I think Daniel Craig is a great James Bond. He is an iconic Bond for sure. The highlight is probably the emotional love story between Bond and Madeline, which was really touching, super touching, especially at the end. I shed a little tear. I found the bad guy, Safin's objectives to be a little confusing though. And I always get a little frustrated during non-superhero action movies where it's just, there are so many times where James Bond just luckily avoided getting shot. How many times can you really avoid getting shot by villains? It's like John Wick a little bit. I don't know. That's fine. He's James Bond. It's a movie. But regardless, ultimately, this film was a beautiful and emotional finale to Daniel Craig's successful career as 007. Daniel Craig, you're a legend. We are giving, as are all the entire cast, but we're giving No Time to Die an 8.2 out of 10. That is a silver Coby coin. Great review for a spy movie. Next up, we have another 2021 film that I recently saw in theaters, Lamb, directed by Vladimir Johansson. Lamb is an Icelandic horror/drama about a husband and wife living in rural Iceland, herding sheep, who find and begin raising a half-human, half-lamb child. This film is awesomely weird and a really good tragedy, a really good example of a tragic story. The half-lamb child is also super cool, super cute, and mind-blowing. When we're first encountering this lamb child, I thought, wow, this is the best thing I've ever seen. However, the ending, not sufficiently satisfying, unfortunately, which is a huge bummer considering how epic the beginning of the movie is. But the end is kind of a bummer, but the beginning, so good. Ultimately, this movie is awesome and will hopefully and likely become a cult classic of some kind. However, for such an imaginative movie, the tragic ending does feel pretty predictable. So, still a great movie. I'm giving it a great review, an 8 out of 10, a silver Coby coin for Lamb, but could have been way higher if it had the momentum, if it held on to the momentum it had at the beginning. So, silver Coby coin for Lamb. Next up, we have the 2021 film, The Last Duel, directed by Ridley Scott. The Last Duel is a historical drama featuring 3 points of view regarding a woman being raped in medieval France, the point of view of her husband, the point of view of the rapist, and her point of view. The film is super powerful, it's a really fascinating depiction of medieval France, and also interesting. I thought about it. It might be the first hashtag Me Too kind of event in history. I also really liked the Rashomon-like POV switching, which is super fascinating. Great way to tell a story. Super, super interesting. Although the switching of the perspectives is interesting, though, it does make certain scenes feel repetitive, which is frustrating considering how long the movie is. So I think they could have probably the aspects that are totally repetitive where very little changes. I don't know. Probably doesn't need to be there, but that's fine. Ultimately, this is an incredible film that I think will be a worthy Oscar contender this year. Its failure at the box office is an interesting testament, though, to the state of the blockbuster age we're currently in. It's a bummer that it's a box office failure, but understandable. I think once it's released to a streaming platform, though, it'll be extremely popular. Great movie. Really freaking great movie. 8.5 out of 10 on Coby's brain. Silver Coby coin. Great review for The Last Duel. Next up, we have the 2021 film Dune, directed by Denis Villeneuve. Dune is a sci-fi epic that introduces us into the Dune universe, a complex, futuristic story of intergalactic politics. The film's cast, cinematography, score, production design, and pretty much everything else about it are incredible. It's so cool. It's really, really a spectacle that seeing it in theaters is pretty freaking dope. The film is mind-blowing. Any sci-fi fan will probably love it. However, the scope of the Dune universe is colossal. The details of the planet Caladan were glossed over a little too quickly. It didn't really, I'm sure, so I may qualify my statement that all sci-fi fans will love it because, yeah, they had, the filmmakers had a difficult task of world building this enormous universe, literal universe, very quickly with a single movie. It's pretty obvious that they're going to have to make more movies, and I'm excited for that. It's going to be a massive franchise, so maybe they could have even broken it into more movies, made it a little bit less ambitious for the sake of world building. Because the planet Caladan, it's like, how do they have all this tech and all that stuff? We don't see that much of the planet, but that makes it makes sense. What are they supposed to do? They have a lot of story to tell, not a lot of time to do it. Ultimately, Dune is clearly going to be a massive blockbuster franchise, and I'm here for it. It was dope, and I'm ready to see more of it. Here on Coby's Brain, we are giving Dune an 8.2 out of 10. That is a silver Coby coin for Dune. Looking forward to the sequel. Next up, we have the 2017 documentary Whitney, Can I Be Me?, directed by Nick Broomfield and Rudy Dolezal. Whitney, Can I Be Me? Is a documentary about Whitney Houston and many of the struggles that she experienced in her life. I liked it. I'm a big Whitney Houston fan. It had a lot of interesting archival footage from Whitney's life that you kind of got to watch this specific documentary to see, probably. And I think it does a pretty good job of telling her story. However, I don't really love the fact that it really was more focused on her death. That's how it starts, was with her death, and then also her struggles, as opposed to her impact on the world. Ultimately, this is not my favorite Whitney Houston documentary, but still really good, really impressive. Whitney Houston was a legend, an angel placed on an imperfect planet Earth, if you ask me. But whatever. Anyways, we are giving Whitney, Can I Be Me? A 7.9 on Coby's Brain. It's a great review. Bronze Coby coin for this Whitney Houston documentary. Next up, we have a 2018 documentary, Whitney, directed by Kevin McDonald. Whitney is the 2018 documentary, which came a year after the 2017 Whitney Houston documentary, Whitney, Can I Be Me? And it's another documentary about the life of Whitney Houston. It is one of the best edited documentaries that I've seen in a long time. It really puts Whitney in the context of the historical events taking place through some really awesome montages. I think the film has some pretty great interviews with numerous individuals involved in Whitney's life, and obviously very tragic. But I think it if you ask me, if you have to see one Whitney documentary, this should be the one. This one is super good. Ultimately, this is probably the best documentary I've seen on Whitney Houston, who is a true legend within Coby's brain. Shout out Whitney Houston. We are giving this other Whitney Houston documentary an 8.3 out of 10 on Coby's brain. A silver Coby coin for this Whitney Houston documentary. Up next, we have the 2020 film Paper Tiger, directed by Paul Kowalski. Paper Tiger is an independent film about a widowed mother who fears that her mentally ill and socially isolated son is going to become a school shooter. The film raises super fascinating ethical dilemma about what should a mother who fears that her son is going to hurt people, what should she do? This is a relevant dilemma for sure, considering the number of school shooters whose families may suspect that something is wrong. It's crazy dilemma. Well, what would you do in a situation like that? I don't know. I don't know if I had a kid who I suspected was going to be a school shooter. What do you do in a situation like that? It's crazy, and the outcome, nuts. I will not spoil it here. However, some of the acting in the film, not super compelling, but still a great film. Ultimately, the film is deeply engaging and an interesting take on this really unfortunate school shooter phenomenon, with an ending that will really leave you thinking. Shout out Paul Kowalski. You crushed it with this one. We are giving it an 8 out of 10 on Coby's brain. That's a silver Coby coin for the legendary Paul Kowalski. Next up, we have the 2017 documentary Basquiat, Rage to Riches, directed by David Schulman. Basquiat, Rage to Riches is a documentary about the rise and tragic fall of Jean-Michel Basquiat. The documentary features interviews from a lot of people who knew this absolutely legendary artist quite well, including his sisters, a lot of his friends, and some of the people who helped fund his work early on. It does a really good job of describing Basquiat's background and the circumstances and politics that led to a lot of his creations, and also showing his artistic process, which was super interesting. And then also kind of the events, his relationship with Andy Warhol as a collaborator, and then the events that led to his tragic heroin overdose death at age 27. It really, though, however, it was really good, but it kind of glossed over those final years quite quickly. But I don't know, that could just be because at that point he was not doing too well, and he was probably pretty depressed and addicted in those years, and may have been a lot less prolific. Ultimately, this documentary does a great job of outlining Basquiat's childhood, street art background in 80s New York, and then his come up as one of the most famous artists of the 20th century, if not the. One cannot help but develop a deep appreciation for his work after watching this documentary, if you don't know too much about Basquiat. We're giving this documentary an 8 out of 10 on Coby's brain. That is a silver Coby coin. Next up, we have the 2000 film Downtown 81, directed by Ido Bertoglio. Downtown 81 is a film that stars Jean-Michel Basquiat as a struggling New York artist in 1981. So it was shot in, I think, 1981, and it was released in 2000. I think the footage was lost or something for a long time. But yeah, the biggest appeal of the film is definitely Basquiat, who is crazy to see on. It's crazy to see him on screen. He's obviously a super charismatic and legendary figure. However, it is also super fascinating to see Rundown Manhattan in 1981 from a documentary, the Basquiat documentary I talked about in the last section review. I was really curious about New York, Manhattan in the 80s, where it was really this artistic kind of artistic mecca, and the hip art scene at the time was really interesting too, as well as the music. The music was also another really good part of the film. However, unfortunately, the ADR of the film is painfully bad. They had to ADR it because I guess they lost a lot of sound. Basquiat, it's not even Basquiat's voice. There also isn't a whole lot of plot to the film at all. It's more of a, kind of experimental film. Anyways, ultimately, the film is more of a Warhol-esque experimental film than a narrative one, but seeing Basquiat and legendary artistry of the 80s in New York City was enough to keep me entertained, despite the lack of a really compelling plot. Nonetheless, we are giving Downtown 81 a 7.6 out of 10. That's a bronze Coby coin for Downtown 81. Next up, we are going to transition into the TV shows within Coby's entertainment blog, starting with My Unorthodox Life, created by Jeff Jenkins, Ross Weintraub, Renaud Orlemans, and Julia Hart. So season 1 came out in 2021. There is one season currently on Netflix, but I believe it got renewed for a second season. My Unorthodox Life is a reality show series about fashion industry CEO Julia Hart and her formerly ultra-Orthodox Jewish family. On the one hand, the show is like an East Coast Kardashians, East Coast Jewish instead of Armenian Kardashians. While on the other hand, it is about religious identity and fundamentalism. And also the fashion industry, but I guess so is the Kardashians in a lot of ways. I don't know. It makes for a very interesting set of circumstances, made even more entertaining by the characters in the show's very large personalities, particularly Julia Hart. Yeah, Julia Hart's kind of a legend, honestly. I'm sure that this season of the show is not going to be the last we see of this iconic individual, Julia Hart. However, the show, I think you could make a pretty strong argument that the show might paint religious Jewry and possibly Jewry as a whole in a pretty negative light. It will be interesting to see what the show's long-term legacy and impact is going to be. But yeah, it definitely does not make you think that Orthodox Jews are decent people, which isn't true. There's obviously a lot of good Orthodox Jewish people out there, and a lot of whom are not completely fundamentalist, but there are a lot who are, obviously. So it's an interesting show, interesting topic. Ultimately, the show is super entertaining, obviously, thanks to the characters, but I also think Julia's fervent anti-normative life philosophy feels normative itself at times. And as I said earlier, doesn't really paint Judaism, and especially Orthodox Judaism, in a very good light. Nonetheless, it's really hard to stop watching this show. Super addictive and entertaining. So on Coby's Brain, we're giving it a 7.7 out of 10. That is a bronze Coby coin for my unorthodox life. Probably going to watch season 2 when that comes out. Next up, we have Squid Game, created by Hwang Dong-hyuk. And season 1 came out in 2021, if you don't know. Squid Game is a South Korean Netflix series about people in debt playing a game where their lives are at risk. The show's premise, if you don't already know, which would be shocking, if you live under a rock and don't already know, the show's premise is deeply compelling and really makes you think about the lengths at which we would go for money within a capitalist society. The show is incredibly well done, super entertaining. Wow, just amazing. However, the English speakers in the show are not the best actors. That's the one part where I thought, wow, this aspect of when there's the rich people speaking English. I don't know. If you see the show, you know what I'm talking about. Ultimately, Squid Game is a fascinating show that will likely have a stronghold on international culture for a long time. It will also have the world thinking about the dangers of capitalism and how we can better serve those of the people in the population who are in debt and are struggling financially, because Squid Game is not a good solution. But yeah, this was an amazing show, absolutely incredible. We are giving Squid Game a 9.1 on Coby's Brain. That's a gold Coby coin. Don't give those out every day, so way to go, Squid Game. You crushed it. Next up, we have What If, created by A.C. Bradley, and season 1 on Disney Plus came out 2021. What If is the 4th series in the Marvel Cinematic Universe about the Watcher, a character who observes the multiverse and all of the possible events that could take place within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I guess is actually the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse now. The show is really a Marvel/animation fan's dream. Yeah, the animation's super cool. The cell shading, where it's 3D, but it kind of looks 2D. We get to see all kinds of divergent timelines that take place within our favorite stories. The anthology aspect of the show was super fun, and however, it was really cool, especially to see the parts of the show where the narrative carried over from one episode to the end. That was also really interesting, seeing how different universes can intersect now in the Marvel universe, Marvel multiverse. Doesn't really contribute to the overall MCU narrative wise, but that's fine. And that's the other thing. The other thing that's some episodes way better than other episodes. Some episodes are kind of but some are wow. You know what I mean? Yeah, you do. Ultimately, What If is a unique contribution to the Marvel Cinematic Universe that is a ton of fun, and I hope to see more of it. For real. I heard that they were considering making a continuation of T'Challa as Star-Lord, but unfortunately, Chadwick Boseman died, and they're unable to do that. But I'm sure we'll see more animation from Marvel Studios soon. We love this show on Coby's Brain. We're giving it an 8.8 out of 10. Silver Coby coin for What If. Next up, we have Chicago Party Ant, created by Chris Witowski, John Barinholtz, and Katie Rich. Season 1 on Netflix came out in 2021. Chicago Party Ant is an adult animated comedy about the hard partying, Chicago-loving, Chicago native who is named Aunt Diane, and who must live with her nephew while he sorts out his life prior to leaving for Stanford. I found the show to be hilarious. Diane's dirtbag personality and passion for Chicago were so funny. I found so funny. Kept me laughing throughout the entirety of the show, which paints a pretty harsh but overall pretty lovable portrait of the Midwest. The show was not super well reviewed, I think, because its repetitive Chicago-specific jokes were repetitive. But I didn't mind. I thought they were really funny. This, again, is my adult animated comedies are probably my favorite genre of television. So, I don't know. I might have liked it. If you're also into that genre, I'd recommend it. But if not, you might not. Anyways, ultimately, despite the fact that this show was panned by critics, I found it hilarious. Diane never really develops as a character, but I think that's fine because if she learned any lessons, she wouldn't be the epic, legendary Chicago party aunt. So, Coby's brain loved this show. I'm giving it an 8.1 out of 10. Silver Coby coin for Chicago party aunt. Next up, we are transitioning into Coby's music blog. We're going to start out with Lil Nas X's Montero, which came out in September 2021. Montero is the debut album by Lil Nas X. It's mostly pop, but has a lot of rap influence. Bangers include Dead Right Now, Industry Baby featuring Jack Harlow, One of Me featuring Elton John, Dollar Sign Slime featuring Megan Thee Stallion. But a lot of the songs, maybe that I didn't like as much, are songs that are probably going to make millions and millions and millions of dollars for Lil Nas X. But yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of the poppier songs, but I appreciated them, and they're obviously good the first couple times you hear them. Ultimately, an impressive album for Lil Nas X that probably proves that he's an actual artist that's here to stay, not just the guy who made Old Town Road. I don't think Lil Nas X is going anywhere. He's becoming quite a cultural icon. And we like the album on Coby's brain. We're giving it a 7.7 out of 10. A bronze Coby coin for Lil Nas X. Next up, we have Lil Tecca's We Love You Tecca 2, which was released in August 2021. We Love You Tecca 2 is the third studio album by Lil Tecca, who's a former SoundCloud rapper who I've been following and who I'm a pretty big fan of. I really like him. Bangers include Repeat It with Gunna, Never Left, Seaside featuring Ian Dior, Choppa Shoot the Loudest featuring Chief Keef and Trippie Redd, and About You featuring Nav. So there's obviously a lot of bangers on this album, but I think Tech is really good, but I think he does best when he's collaborating. He kind of struggles to carry the songs on his own. The strongest songs on the album are definitely the ones with features, but that's the case with most artists. So that's to be expected. Ultimately, a very impressive album. Lil Tecca looks like a kid, but raps like an OG. So we like this album on Coby's brain. We're giving it a 7.8 out of 10. A bronze Coby coin for Lil Tecca. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm impressed. Next up, we are transitioning into Coby's reading blog, where we are going to start with the 1997 book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a book about the importance of financial literacy, saving money, and buying assets. So I'm always looking for advice on how to improve Coby. And so I read this book. I thought it would maybe help me become better at getting money. Who doesn't love that? Advice included, don't work for money. Have money work for you because your dollars are your employees, which is pretty true. If you have your dollars invested, they're actually working for you. They're making you money all the time. That's kind of cool. That's a good lesson. Another lesson, making sure your income is being used to buy assets and not to simply pay the government or pay your bills. So if you're not buying assets, you're not you're hiring these dollar employees for you. You should do that. Also, we should avoid the rat race, which comes from this false notion that when we have an increased income, we can justify increasing our expenses. No. Actually, when we have increased income, we should be using that increased income to increase our assets. And then if we want luxuries, we can purchase luxuries with the income generated from those assets. Don't get caught in the rat race. Don't continually increase the quality of your lifestyle just because you're making more money. It's going to put you into the rat. You're going to be a rat racing, and no one wants that. So the rich buy assets, the poor buy liabilities. I'll just kind of list the rest of the advice. Creating corporations is a great way to avoid taxes because you can pay for expenses before your taxes, and then your income becomes smaller to tax. Great advice. Rich really means your income generated from your assets is greater than your expenses. I don't know how many people that's the case for. Very small percentage of people can say that they're like that, but that's just the way it is. Unfortunately, in this income gapped society, which is very sad. Anyways, financial literacy is understanding three things: accounting, investing, marketing. Oh, four things: accounting, investing, marketing, and the law. Job stands for just over broke. Just because you have a high-paying job, that doesn't mean anything, according to this book, because it just means you might be in the rat race unless you're actually saving that money. Pay yourself first. You'll figure out how to don't worry as much about paying your taxes and paying your bills and all that, because pay yourself first by putting money into your assets first. Take risks. Your mind and learning are your greatest asset. A lot of great advice. I will certainly heed a lot of this advice. It's super useful. Definitely hope to take all of these lessons into consideration. I think most of them are pretty good. Some of them sound a little out there, but the one downside of the book, besides the, I guess, controversial nature of some of his ideas and then also his politics, it seems like he's trying to sell you his game and other books throughout the book. So that's kind of annoying. But ultimately, I'm really glad I read this book because it taught me the importance of not just saving money, but using saved money to buy assets. Taught me that in order to avoid the rat race, you shouldn't be spending more money just because you're making more money. You should be saving more money because you're making more money. And for this reason, I'm very glad I read it. I enjoyed it. I'm giving this book an 8 out of 10 on Coby's brain. A silver Coby coin for Robert Kiyosaki. Next up, we have the 2018 book by James Clear, Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits is a book about the enormous power of habits and how to create good habits and get rid of bad ones. So the book has a lot of good information and advice, including the quality of our lives depends on the quality of our habits. True. The positive effects of good habits start slow but compound over time. True. Hopefully. I hope that's true. The attainment of goals is less about setting goals, but more about creating systems that lead to the attainment of those goals. Everyone has the same. Everyone wants to get rich. Everyone has that as a goal, but it's the people who build systems that will help them attain that goal that actually achieve those goals. Integrating your habits into your identity is the best way to make them last. If you want to start doing something, you want to be someone you want to save, you say, oh, I'm someone who saves money, then you're going to do that because that's part of your identity and you take pride in it. So then that habit will probably last. We do our habits automatically, which frees up our mind to do other things we want. So if you have good habits, we're just going to do them automatically, and that's great because then you don't have to worry about them anymore. This is the big thing. The 4 stages of habit formation are cue, craving, response, and reward. If we want to make good habits, we have to make the cue obvious. We have to figure out what it is that triggers the habits. We have to make the craving attractive. We have to really make that craving strong. We have to make the response easy. That response is the actual action of the habit. We have to make it as easy as possible, and we have to make the reward satisfying. The reverse is true for breaking habits. And finally, routine and tracking are the easiest ways to implement the habits you want. Great advice. Wow. Some of the anecdotes felt a little forced, but still useful. Love this book. The lessons of this book are going to stay with me. I'm going to try to build a lot of great habits after reading it. Highly recommend. Ultimately, this is an incredible book that anyone seeking to improve their lives through their habits, which is probably the best way to improve one's life, should read. So if you're into this this is the best self-help book that I've read in a while. So I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 on Coby's Brain. Yet another gold Coby coin in this episode. Very rare, but this is a great book. Highly, highly, highly recommend Atomic Habits. Okay, that's our show. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Coby's Brain, and we'll see you next time.